Hello there, I'm Dr. Tyler, and this is my book, Foundations of Strongman Training. I've used my scientific training to perform brand new research studies on the sport of strongman and combined it with over a decade of personal experience competing in strongman and powerlifting to teach you how to train like the strongest people on earth. I've decided to make a video series on the content of the book. I'm going to share with you everything from how the book idea came to be to practical considerations for the insights gained from these scientific studies. By the end of this video series, you'll have the information you need to optimize your strongman training. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Foundations of Strongman Training. This episode is number 2 in this 8-part video series about my research and inquiries into the sport of strongman and strength training that pertains to that sport. So, in case you missed last episode, I went over a bit of my backstory. Why am I so fascinated with strength? How that led me to the sport of strongman, and how performing for a few years led me to have some of these questions about how to optimize my training, and ultimately how the scientific literature didn't really give me any good answers to some of the, fundamental questions that one has when they're trying to create training programs or be a strongman athlete. So, today, as promised, we're going to actually get into the content of the book. And today I want to do a brief literature review on the scientific articles that do exist for the sport of strongman. In the last episode, I talked about how I could hardly find any articles. Mind you, that was 10 years or so ago when I started. Since then, there's been a bunch of new articles on the sport. And so in the book, I go over about 21 of these articles, and I do a kind of brief review, summarize who the papers are by, kind of like their main findings or one main finding they had. And so that's what I'm going to share with you guys today. Any good scientific inquiry starts with a literature review. I mean, any inquiry really does. You might ask people, but ultimately they probably read things from some places. So it's all going to go back to literature. So in this case, wanting to know about strongman, there's no different. I just did what I've always done in scientific inquiries. Take to the databases. Go and look what articles are out there are related to whatever topic that I was searching about. In this case, this was strongman competition and strongman training. And like any kind of articles that were associated to that. So, as I mentioned previously, when I started this inquiry, there was very few of these out there. And actually, some of the studies that have had a bit more meaningful insights have actually happened in the last decade since I started this inquiry. So that's like really, kind of heartwarming to see. But when I started, there was very little. Today, I'm just going to give you a brief literature review. I hope in future videos I can go into each of these, studies separately because there's some really cool insights in them. But for today, I just want to share with you the brief review that I've provided in the book. Just to reiterate the kind of difference in number of articles we're looking at here. If you go look in the literature for general strength training articles, so that could be like anything to do with any sports where strength training is used as the means to improve the performance in that sport, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of articles collectively that have been done over many decades. Lots of books, lots of content there. And then when you look at strongman specifically, I found less than 30 articles. And in the review I'm going to share with you in a few minutes here, I've only included 21 articles. So those were 21 articles where they look specifically at strongman training or aspects of strongman competition. So that's quite the disparity, right? So like hundreds or thousands compared to 21. But it's a good sign because when I started, there was probably less than 10 of these articles. So for the amount of study to double, and then in Foundations of Strongman Training, I've added 4 more studies. That's actually a good sign. It means things are gaining popularity, not just in the competitions, but we see people are, thirsty for scientific inquiry into the sport as well and trying to understand, how do the strongest people on earth become that way. So before we get into the literature review here, I just want to mention that it is good that all of these, the growth of the interest is happening. Love to see that. I hope that some of you potentially watching this that have the same kind of mindset about strongman with me will collaborate with me in the future in terms of research. But none of these articles that I found answered the 4 fundamental questions that I, came up with for the book. Just to recap those, the 4 questions are: which skills should strongman athletes master? What's the distribution of motion patterns within the sport? What's the distribution of effort patterns in the sport? And how often do the best athletes compete? So, when I looked at the literature, some studies had maybe tangential conclusions or discussion points about these 4 big questions, but nothing solid. And it wasn't really the focus of those studies. So, but that's okay because, as I said, I added 4 more studies, one for each one of these questions. And so now there's some data to go on, and hopefully, whether it's my work or others, will be able to expand on that into the future. So let's get into this brief review of the strongman scientific literature. What I'm going to do is just read the excerpt from the book because it's already summarized in a really nice manner. And as I'm reading and mentioning these papers, I'll include images on the screen that give you the title and everything. So you have the references. You can go look them up yourselves. All right, here we go. After reviewing the literature, there are 3 major themes of inquiry that the existing studies fit into: individual movement studies, comparisons, and surveys. First, there have been several explorations on individual strongman events. Keogh et al. Performed a kinematic analysis of sled pulling, noting the benefits sled pulling may have to other sports, such as sprinting. Keogh and colleagues also examined biomechanical characteristics of the tire flip event. It was found that the duration of the second pull phase, from when the tire is moving from above the knees to beginning the transition to the hands, was key to determining the performance of the movement. Sellers and Rudy discussed the tire flip as well, providing insights about its application to strength and conditioning programs. Later, Keogh et al. Performed a kinematic analysis of the farmer's walk. The results show that a greater stride length, stride rate, and reduced ground contact time were exhibited in the fastest trials to complete the course. Stastny et al. Studied the involvement of various lower body muscles in the farmer's walk movement. They concluded that the farmer's walk may be particularly helpful for individuals looking to strengthen the gluteus medius muscle. Lastly, the versatility of the sandbag implement was discussed, and a 4-week program using sandbags was proposed by Sell et al. These studies provide insights to understanding and the technical aspects for a few of the strongman events. The second group of articles is focused on comparisons related to various strongman events. Waller et al. Examined the integration of several strongman events into a strength and conditioning program, providing descriptions of events and practical considerations. McGill et al. Compared the effect of various strongman events on the biomechanical characteristics of the trunk and lumbar spine. A discussion about the application of strongman events to other sports was offered by Zemke and Wright. They included discussion on the specificity between strongman events and other sport skills. Winwood et al. Studied the relationships between strongman skill performance of novice athletes and both anthropometrics and traditional strength training exercises. They found that a 1 repetition maximum squat and a flexed arm girth had the highest correlation with strongman competition performance in their group of athletes. A comparison of biomechanical characteristics between the farmer's walk, deadlift, and unloaded walk was also performed by Winwood et al. The authors concluded that the farmer's walk may be more advantageous for generating forward and vertical propulsive forces with less stress on the lumbar spine than the deadlift movement. Next, Winwood et al. Compared the kinematics and kinetics of the sled pull and back squat movements. When using the same load for both movements, it was found that the squat resulted in higher vertical forces while the sled pull resulted in higher horizontal forces. A comparison of the log press and barbell clean and jerk exercise was then published by Winwood et al. They concluded that the log press may be used as an effective alternative to the barbell clean and jerk movement, with added benefits such as being able to train with a neutral grip position. Harris et al. Compared strongman training and typical strength training exercises. They found that strongman training produced an acute physiological response that was as effective as standard strength training movements. The ability of high-intensity interval training, or HIIT training, to improve both aerobic fitness and the strength of well-trained strongman athletes was demonstrated by Androulakis Korakakis et al. Dr. Pack. They found that both aerobic and strength-based HIIT sessions resulted in improvement in both aerobic fitness and strength. Reynolds et al. Compared the motion outputs between the barbell and log push press, concluding that the barbell was superior for maximizing force, power, velocity, and impulse. Finally, Hindle et al. Performed a systematic review of strongman studies that involved biomechanical analyses of strongman exercises. Their review provides a summary of recent insights from the farmer's walk, suitcase carry, keg walk, yoke walk, heavy sled pull, vehicle pull, tire flip, Atlas stone lift, and log lift events. The results of these comparisons can help athletes to consider the different effects that training decisions may have on their performance of strongman skills. Okay, the final group of studies was focused on surveying the populations involved in the sport of strongman. Winwood et al. Polled strongman competitors about their strength and conditioning practices to identify how these athletes are structuring their training. Next, Winwood et al. Surveyed coaches about the use of strongman implements in their strength and conditioning programs, finding that some of the implements, such as sleds and sandbags, were amongst the most commonly used implements. A survey of the tapering practices of strongman athletes leading into competition was then published by Winwood et al. Participants noted that their last heavy training session and final resistance training session were 9.1 plus or minus 3.1 days and 4.7 plus or minus 2 days before a contest, respectively. Winwood and colleagues then conducted a survey of the preparation strategies of strongman athletes on competition day. One notable result was that 94% of participants indicated that they used a warm-up to prepare for contests. And lastly, Kramer et al. Analyzed the body composition of elite-level strongman competitors across a 5-year period. It was found that the average lean body mass of these athletes was 23+% higher than NFL linemen, collegiate track and field athletes, and professional rugby players. That's a lot. The conclusions of these surveys provide guidance for various aspects of strongman training and competitive performance. There you have it. That was the brief version of the literature review that I performed when writing Foundations of Strongman Training. You know, like any good inquiry, I'm always looking for the latest articles and trying to publish more of my own. But it's honestly a really good start. There's a lot of great insights in there that I found when reading these papers. Particularly, if you're interested, I would go look at some of the survey papers that Dr. Winwood and his colleagues did about tapering practices and aspects of strongman competition. and then Dr. Hindle's systematic review of the biomechanics of those, I believe it was 9 or so strongman events, was a really good place to start, I think, for anyone who's kind of interested in learning more about the science behind strongman training, at least, what we have covered in the literature so far. So, in closing here, I hope that gives you a little bit of insights about what is out there in the literature that's specific to strongman. And I also included those references for you so you can go look them up yourself. I encourage you. If you're like me, you'll find this stuff very fascinating and hopefully useful, might be able to help you with optimizing your training. Now, one last note is that I'm totally open to the fact that I may have missed some studies, especially if they were published more recently. So, if you are someone who publishes in this area, or you've read some studies that I may have missed and you think are important to this work that I'm doing, please let me know in the comments. Leave a link, leave a study title, authors. I'm happy to go dig for it myself, but I would love to know if I've missed anything. Okay, so that's it for this episode. I hope you learned something valuable, and I hope you have a bit of a sense for what the scientific literature currently is on the sport of strongman. In the next episode, I'm going to spend a little bit of time doing a brief history of the sport of strongman, talk about the major competitions and where we're at now. And then I'm going to dive into 5 big challenges that I outline in chapter 1 of the book that are mostly unique to the sport of strongman, make training for the sport very challenging, and things that you're going to have to consider whenever you're planning your training. Okay, thanks for watching. Take care.